Hello, we're continuing our reviews of Universal's Frankenstein series, and the movie we want to review is 1945's House of Dracula, which I guess would count more as a Dracula movie, and I actually do have it on the Dracula Legacy Collection. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that box set.
Yes. I have the Frankenstein version of it.
Now, House of Dracula is the 5th film of Universal's Dracula series. It's the 7th film of Universal's Frankenstein series, and it's the 4th film of the Wolfman series. And the movie acts as a direct sequel to 1944's House of Frankenstein, and like that movie, it does the same gimmick where it's Dracula, the Frankenstein Monster, and the Wolfman together in one movie. So what do you guys think of House of Dracula?
It's easily the weakest entry in the series.
I would agree. Yeah, I don't want to say it sucks, but it kind of sucks. I mean, here's the thing about this movie. I hated it when I first saw it. When I watched it again a few years ago, because I did these reviews before on YouTube, I took those old reviews down. And when I watched it again for that review, I think I liked it a little better, but then watching it again just the other night, this is not a very good movie at all. Like, I feel like it tries to make up for how Dracula was sort of just a side story in House of Frankenstein, but even they still don't do it very well, because Dracula is, spoiler alert, killed off like halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
The scientific explanations for the monsters I thought was BS.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I normally like it when you sort of establish a universe where science and the supernatural could coexist, but this was done in such a way where I felt like they were just kind of crapping all over everything that was established in the previous films, especially with the Wolfman, where they established a scientific explanation for the Wolfman. I was like, seriously? That kind of just shits over everything that the other films established. Oh yeah, the science in this movie was so clearly pulled out of the writers' asses.
Yeah.
Now, the plot of the House of Dracula is it begins where Count Dracula himself goes to see this doctor named Edelman. It turns out that Dracula wants a cure for his vampirism, and Edelman, who at first doesn't believe in the supernatural, might have a way to cure Dracula of his vampirism. At the same time, Lawrence Talbot is going to see Edelman, and Edelman comes up with a scientific explanation for why Talbot turns into a werewolf, and he determines that he might be able to cure him. Talbot and Edelman eventually discover the body of the Frankenstein monster, along with the body of Dr. Niemann from House of Frankenstein, who at the end of that movie got sucked into quicksand, but somehow ended up under Edelman's mansion. Eventually, it becomes clear that Dracula is far more interested in taking the soul of one of Edelman's female assistants than he is of actually being cured. Eventually, and this is a spoiler, but Edelman does kill Dracula, but Dracula's spirit ends up taking possession of Edelman, and under possession from the soul of Dracula, Edelman ends up trying to bring the Frankenstein monster back to life. And that's the basic plot line of the House of Dracula, and a lot of this plot is basically just go with it. John Carradine, who played Dracula in House of Frankenstein, once again plays the vampiric count. In the movie, Lon Chaney Jr. once again plays Lawrence Talbot and the Wolfman. Glenn Strange, who played the monster in the last movie, once again plays the monster in this film. Onslow Stevens plays Dr. Edelman. Martha O'Driscoll plays the character of Maricia. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but she is one of Edelman's female assistants, and she's the one that Dracula goes after in the film, and she also becomes kind of a love interest for Lawrence Talbot. In the movie, Jane Addams plays Nina, who is another one of Edelman's female assistants, but she's also a hunchback. This movie is kind of going with the whole hunchback assistant archetype, only this time it's a female hunchback. And Lionel Atwill plays a police inspector in this movie. Atwill also appeared in the last few films of this series. So, what do you guys think of the acting and the characters in this movie, and about the movie itself? Like, I mean, we talked a little bit about what we think of the movie, but any more of your thoughts on it?
I mean, the acting is good. It's just really the story that's weak.
Yeah. I mean, I like what's his name, Onslow, who played...
Onslow Stevens.
He actually was pretty good.
Yeah,
I give him that credit. It was like a little bit like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
That's actually something I wanted to point out, was it seems like they also... It's almost like they also wanted to have Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde in this. I don't know why they didn't also have that, because I think at this point the book was public domain, so they probably could have done that without having to worry about rights or anything.
Yeah, I mean, Onslow Stevens just does a great job of playing, at one point, the very nice, caring doctor, but then after he's infected with the blood of Count Dracula, just this deranged madman.
Compared to Neiman, he actually really did care, but it wasn't really his fault why they keep pushing the operation back for Jane Addams' character.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I also want to point out, like, some of the continuity problems in this film, like, okay... So, House of Frankenstein is still in continuity because they find the body of Boris Karloff's character from that movie along with the monster. How the hell did Dracula come back after dying in House of Frankenstein, and how the hell did Okay, with Lawrence Talbot it makes sense because he was cursed with eternal life, so... It kind of makes sense that he came back in this one, even though he was shot with a silver bullet in the previous film.
During the scene where they find the monster encased in all the, quicksand and he's, in all that disgusting, mud and all. When they filmed that scene, Glenn Strange, he had to be covered in that, cold, muck for hours and hours. So, he was getting very cold and, it was tiresome. So Lon Chaney Jr. Just said, oh, here, drink some whiskey or, whatever he was drinking. And, because they say that alcohol will warm you up.
It does, it does.
And so by the end of the day, Glenn Strange could hardly dress or walk.
Ah. You wanted to point out how Lawrence Talbot does at least get a happy ending here?
Yes, that is, I think, the film's strongest point, because I think after all the suffering he's been through, he deserves a happy ending, so I was very happy with
True,
that.
but if you assume Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is in continuity, which that's debatable, but we'll talk about that, that basically means that happiness didn't actually last, though.
Yeah, that's debatable.
Well,
but even so, even if it didn't last, at least he had some sort of temporary happiness if it didn't last.
Yeah.
And I also just want to mention how, Universal, with the ending to this movie, it's like they got so lazy, and it's so obvious with the ending, because as soon as you see the monster, walking or trying to walk out of the burning lab, it's so painfully obvious that it's just the same ending they used for Ghost of Frankenstein.
Lazy.
Like, they didn't even try to hide it.
They didn't.
Oh yeah, and the Frankenstein Monster's barely in this film. The only reason I chose to review this as part of this series of reviews is because it does count as part of the series.
Yeah.
But, once again, I don't even want to say it's really more of a Dracula movie. If anything, this and House of Frankenstein, I feel like are more Wolfman movies.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
This movie was just, other than a few good things, it was just a waste of time.
It was.
So yeah, that was our review of House of Dracula. Our next movie review will be on Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So stay tuned for that review, and bye.